The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Holloway Industries headquarters as Damien Holloway stared at the medical reports scattered across his mahogany desk. Each page was a countdown, a clinical documentation of his son's deteriorating condition. But tonight, something else weighed on his mind. Something the doctors hadn't written in their sterile reports. Something Nathaniel had whispered during his last lucid moment 3 days ago. A confession that had chilled Damien to his core. The intercom buzzed softly. Damien pressed the button without turning from the window, where rain streaked down like tears against the glass. His assistant's voice came through, professional but tinged with concern. "Mr. Holloway, the investigator's report on potential candidates has arrived. Should I bring it in?" Damien closed his eyes briefly. 3 months ago, such a conversation would have been unthinkable. But desperation had a way of making the impossible seem reasonable. And after what Nathaniel had told him, after the threat that now hung over everything, time had become even more precious. "Send it in, Martin, and prepare the legal documents we discussed. Make sure the confidentiality clauses are ironclad." Across the city, in a cramped apartment in the Riverside district, Elena Russo was just finishing her shift notes when her phone rang with news that would change everything. But she didn't know yet that accepting this call would pull her into a web of secrets that went far beyond the dying man's last wish. At 27, Elena had dedicated her life to nursing, finding purpose in easing the suffering of others. Her small living space reflected a life lived for others rather than herself. Medical journals were stacked beside donated furniture, and photographs of her late parents hung on walls that needed repainting. But tonight, as she reached for her phone, Elena felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine. The number was unfamiliar, professional looking. "Elena Russo speaking. Miss Russo, my name is Martin Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Damien Holloway. He would like to meet with you regarding an urgent matter. The compensation would be substantial, but I must stress that this conversation requires absolute discretion." Elena frowned, immediately suspicious. The word urgent stuck in her mind like a warning. "I'm not looking for new employment, Mr. Chen. I'm happy at Mercy General. This isn't about employment in the traditional sense. Mr. Holloway specifically requested you based on your reputation for compassion and discretion. He's willing to offer $5 million just for the initial meeting. But Miss Russo, there's something you should know. This matter involves life and death, and possibly more than just one life." The cryptic statement made Eleanor's pulse quicken. "What do you mean, more than one life?" There was a pause on the line, and Elena could hear papers rustling. "I'm not at liberty to say more over the phone, but Mr. Holloway's situation is complicated and time-sensitive. Lives hang in the balance. Miss Russo, will you at least hear what he has to say?" Something in the man's voice, a genuine urgency beneath the professional tone, made Elena pause. Against every instinct screaming this was too good to be true, she found herself agreeing to at least hear more details. But as she hung up, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped onto a path from which there would be no easy return. 2 days later, Elena sat in the back of a luxury car heading toward the Holloway estate in the exclusive Lakeside Heights neighborhood. The $5 million had indeed been transferred to an account Martin had helped her set up with a reputable bank. But along with the money came a non-disclosure agreement, so comprehensive it made Elena wonder what secrets could possibly be worth such protection. The estate took her breath away, but not in the way she expected. Yes, it was beautiful with sprawling gardens and a mansion that looked like it belonged in a Gothic novel. But there was something else too. Something in the way shadows gathered in corners, despite the afternoon sun. Something in the silence that felt too heavy, too watchful. A butler led her through halls decorated with artwork that seemed to follow her with painted eyes. Elena noticed security cameras everywhere, far more than a typical wealthy home would have. When they passed a closed door, she heard what sounded like medical equipment beeping from within. But the butler quickly guided her past Damien Holloway, her in a library that could have housed a small university's collection. He was imposing, silver-haired with sharp features that suggested a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. But his eyes held something that made Elena instinctively step back, not fear exactly, but a desperate intensity that bordered on obsession. "Miss Russo, thank you for coming." Damien's voice was deep, controlled, but Elena heard something beneath it that made her skin prickle. "I'll be direct because I don't have time for games, and because you've already signed the NDA. My son Nathaniel is 29 years old and dying from a rare autoimmune condition. His organs are shutting down one by one. He has perhaps 8 months without aggressive treatment, possibly 3 years with it." Eleanor's professional instincts engaged immediately. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Holloway, but I don't understand what this has to do with me." "Surely he has access to the best medical care available." "He does," Damien said, his composure cracking slightly. "But there's something the doctors don't know. Something Nathaniel told me 3 days ago during what we thought might be his final moments." He moved closer, and Elena resisted the urge to back away. "My son confessed that his condition might not be entirely natural." Elena felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean, not natural?" Damien pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the table. Inside were medical reports, but also photographs. Eleanor's hands trembled as she flipped through them. Pictures of Nathaniel from 2 years ago, healthy and vibrant, then a series showing his rapid decline. But what caught her attention were other photos, pictures of 3 other young men, all around Nathaniel's age, all deceased, all showing similar symptoms. "These men," Damien said quietly, "all died within the last 18 months, all from supposedly rare autoimmune conditions. All were heirs to significant fortunes, and all had one thing in common before they fell ill. They had relationships that their families disapproved of, relationships that ended abruptly before the symptoms began." Elena looked up sharply. "You think someone is poisoning these men?" Damien's expression was grim. "Nathaniel believes he was poisoned by someone close to him, someone he trusted. He ended a relationship 8 months before he got sick, a woman named Victoria Cross. She disappeared shortly after, and he's been deteriorating ever since. But here's what terrifies me, Miss Rousseau. Nathaniel says Victoria mentioned having insurance, something that would guarantee her financial security, even if he left her. At the time, he thought she meant photographs or recordings. Now he wonders if she meant something far worse." Eleanor's mind raced. "If you suspect poisoning, why not go to the police?" "Because we have no proof," Damien said, frustration evident in his voice. "The toxicology reports show nothing definitive. Whatever was used, if anything was used, it's either out of his system or undetectable by standard tests. And Victoria Cross has vanished completely. No trace, no records beyond what we already had. It's as if she never existed." Elena set the folder down with shaking hands. "I still don't understand what you want from me." Damien leaned forward, his intensity almost overwhelming. "I want you to marry my son, not just for companionship, but for protection. If someone is slowly killing him, they might try again. They might try to finish what they started. I need someone with medical knowledge, someone who can watch him constantly, someone who can spot the signs if he's being poisoned again, someone I can trust because you have no connection to my world, no reason to want him dead." The room felt suddenly airless. "You want me to be his bodyguard and his nurse, disguised as his wife. I want you to save his life," Damien said urgently. "In every way that matters. If you can keep him alive long enough for us to find out the truth, if you can convince him to fight and undergo treatment while we investigate, I'll give you $50 million. But more importantly, you might prevent a murder." Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. If you really believe someone is trying to kill your son, you need investigators, security, not a nurse playing detective. We have investigators," Damien said, standing as well. "The best money can buy, but they need time, and Nathaniel is running out of it. Moreover, if the person responsible learns we're investigating, they might accelerate their plans. Nathaniel needs someone close, someone watching over him every moment, someone who seems harmless, but who knows what signs to look for." Eleanor's mind whirled with the implications. And what if I find proof that he's being poisoned? What if the threat is still active? Then you document everything and report to me immediately, Damien said. We go to the authorities with evidence they can't ignore. But until then, you become Nathaniel's best chance at survival. Before Eleanor could respond, a sound made them both turn. The library door had opened silently, and a figure stood in the doorway. Even in the dim light, Eleanor could see the wheelchair, the gaunt frame, the dark eyes that held something far more complex than the simple resignation she had expected. Nathaniel Holloway had been listening. How much did you hear? Damien asked, his voice tight with concern. Nathaniel wheeled himself into the room, his movements deliberate despite obvious weakness. Enough to know you're telling my secrets to a stranger, Father. Enough to know you still think I'm delusional about Victoria. His gaze fixed on Eleanor, and she felt pinned by the intensity there. So you're the latest candidate for my father's desperate scheme. Tell me, Miss Russo, do you believe in ghosts? Because that's what I'm becoming, and I'm not sure even your compassionate nursing can save someone who might already be dead. The words hung in the air like a curse. Eleanor looked between father and son, seeing the desperation in one and the haunted certainty in the other. Something was terribly wrong here. Something that went beyond illness and into darker territory. Every instinct told her to walk away, to take her $5 million, and forget this gothic nightmare. But as Nathaniel's eyes met hers, Eleanor saw something that made her pause. Not just resignation or bitterness, but fear. Real, genuine fear. Whatever was happening to Nathaniel Holloway, he believed it was deliberate. He believed someone wanted him dead. And despite all her doubts, Eleanor couldn't walk away from someone who might be fighting an enemy no one else could see. I need time to think about this, Eleanor said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. Time is a luxury we don't have, Nathaniel said quietly, but I suppose a few days won't make much difference. After all, if Victoria's poison is still working, I'm already on borrowed time. As Eleanor left the mansion that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more ominous, and when she reached her car, she found something that made her blood run cold. A single white rose on her windshield, tied with a black ribbon. No note, no explanation, just a flower that in some cultures symbolized death. Eleanor looked back at the mansion, its windows glowing like eyes in the gathering darkness. Somewhere inside, Nathaniel Holloway was dying, possibly being murdered, and she had just been offered $50 million to step into the middle of what might be a killer's unfinished work. The question was, could she afford to say no? And more importantly, could she afford to say yes? Eleanor spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with her decision. But it wasn't just Damien's proposal that haunted her. It was the white rose. She had taken it to a florist friend who confirmed what Eleanor suspected. It was an expensive variety, the kind used for funerals. Someone had left her a message, but was it a warning or a threat? On the 4th morning, Eleanor made her choice. She called Martin and agreed to the arrangement, but with conditions. She wanted complete access to Nathaniel's medical records, including any tests that had been suppressed or overlooked. She wanted the names of everyone who had access to his food, medication, and living spaces. And she wanted a direct line to Damien's investigators. Most importantly, she wanted the truth. All of it. The wedding was a small, private affair conducted by a judge in the mansion's library. Nathaniel sat in his wheelchair, dressed in an expensive suit that hung loosely on his diminished frame. His expression throughout the ceremony was unreadable, but Eleanor noticed his hands gripping the armrests tightly, knuckles white with tension. As they signed the marriage certificate, Nathaniel leaned close enough for only Eleanor to hear. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Russo. I hope for your sake it's the former, because if my suspicions are correct, you've just painted a target on your back. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. Then I suppose we'll have to watch each other's backs. Mr. Holloway. Something flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. Respect perhaps, or maybe just grim acknowledgement of their shared predicament. Elena moved into the east wing of the mansion the next day. Her suite was connected to Nathaniel's through a shared sitting room, allowing her to monitor him while maintaining the appearance of a normal, if unconventional, marriage. The rooms were luxurious, but felt strangely impersonal, as if they had been staged for someone else's life. The first night, Elena couldn't sleep. Every sound in the old mansion seemed amplified: creaking floorboards, distant doors closing, the whisper of wind through corridors. At 2 a.m, she heard movement from Nathaniel's room. Grabbing her robe, she went to investigate. Nathaniel was awake, sitting by his window and staring out at the moonlit gardens. He didn't turn when she entered, but his voice cut through the darkness. "Can't sleep either? Or are you already on guard duty?" Elena moved closer, noticing the tremor in his hands. "A bit of both, honestly. Are you feeling all right?" "Define all right," Nathaniel said with bitter humor. "Am I dying?" "Yes." "Am I possibly being poisoned?" "Maybe." "Am I now married to a woman I met less than a week ago?" "Definitely. All things considered, I've had better nights." Elena pulled a chair beside him, studying his profile in the moonlight. "Tell me about Victoria Cross." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Why? So you can judge me for being naive enough to trust someone who might have been slowly killing me. So I can understand what we're up against," Elena said gently. "Your father gave me the basics, but I need to know everything. How you met, when things changed. What made you suspect her?" Nathaniel was silent for so long Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, he began to speak. "I met Victoria at a charity gala 18 months ago. She was beautiful, charming, and unlike the socialites I usually encountered, she seemed genuinely interested in me with better than my money. We started dating, and for 6 months, I thought I had found something real. What changed?" Nathaniel's hands clenched. "I found irregularities in some of my accounts, small transfers, nothing that would normally raise flags, but I've always been meticulous about my finances. When I confronted Victoria, she became defensive, said I was paranoid and controlling. We fought, and I ended it. She left that night, and I never saw her again." "And when did you start getting sick?" "About 2 months later," Nathaniel said, his voice dropping. "At first, it was just fatigue, some stomach issues. The doctors said it was stress, but then it got worse, rapidly worse. By the time they diagnosed the autoimmune condition, I was already seriously ill." "Did you tell the doctors about your suspicions regarding Victoria?" Nathaniel turned to face her for the first time. "Would you have believed me? A wealthy heir claiming his ex-girlfriend poisoned him with no evidence. They already thought I was depressed and paranoid. Suggesting deliberate poisoning would have just gotten me psychiatric evaluations." Elena nodded slowly. "But you told your father?" "Eventually, yes. When I thought I was dying, I told him everything." His expression was haunted in the dim light. "I also told him something else, something I haven't told anyone else." Elena waited, sensing this was important. 3 days before I got sick, Victoria gave me a gift, a rare vintage wine, supposedly from her family's collection. She insisted I drink it that night to celebrate our 6-month anniversary. I did, and the next morning, I felt terrible. That's when the symptoms really started." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Do you still have the bottle?" Nathaniel shook his head. "I threw it away during the initial onset of symptoms, before I made the connection. But here's the thing, Elena. After Victoria disappeared, I hired a private investigator to look into her background. He found nothing. No family collection. No history beyond 5 years ago. Victoria Cross didn't exist before she entered my life. The implications settled over them like a cold blanket. So whoever she was, she came into your life with a purpose not to destroy me," Nathaniel said flatly. "The question is why?" "For money." The account transfers were relatively small. "For revenge. I'd never met her before that gala. Or for something else entirely. Something connected to those other heirs who died." Elena remembered the photographs Damien had shown her. Did any of the other victims mention relationships that ended badly before they got sick? I don't know, Nathaniel admitted. My father's investigators are looking into it. But if there's a pattern, if Victoria or someone like her targeted all of us, then this is bigger than just one woman with a grudge. A sound from the corridor made them both freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, passing their doors. Elena moved to investigate, but Nathaniel grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Don't. If someone is watching us, let them think we suspect nothing. Elena reluctantly sat back down. You think someone in this house is involved? I think Victoria couldn't have done this alone, Nathaniel said grimly. She needed information about my routines, my habits, access to my food and drink. Someone had to help her. Over the following weeks, Elena became intimately familiar with the rhythms of the Holloway mansion. There were 10 permanent staff members, each with their own quarters and schedules. There was Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper who had worked for the family for 15 years. Thomas, the chef who prepared all of Nathaniel's special dietary meals. Dr. Raymond, the live-in physician who monitored Nathaniel's condition daily. And various others, maids, groundskeepers, security personnel. Elena watched them all with growing paranoia. Which one, if any, had helped Victoria? Which one might still be working against Nathaniel? She began documenting everything. Every meal Nathaniel ate, every medication he took, every person who entered his rooms. She installed hidden cameras, with Damien's approval, tiny devices that recorded everything. And she started testing Nathaniel's food before he ate it, a precaution that seemed excessive until the night everything changed. It was 3 weeks into their arrangement. Elena had developed a routine of preparing a late-night tea for both of them, something to help Nathaniel sleep despite the pain from his condition. That night, as she poured the tea, she noticed something odd, a faint oily residue on the rim of Nathaniel's cup. Something that hadn't been there when she prepared it. Her blood ran cold. Someone had tampered with the tea while she was in the bathroom. Elena switched the cups, giving Nathaniel hers and taking the doctored one herself. But instead of drinking, she carefully sealed it in a plastic bag from the medical supplies. Nathaniel noticed her strange behavior. What's wrong? Elena kept her voice low. Don't react. Don't look around. But I think someone just tried to poison you again. Nathaniel's face went pale, but to his credit, he remained calm. How do you know? Elena showed him the residue on the cup's rim. This wasn't here when I made the tea. Someone added something while I was out of the room. She pulled out her phone and texted Damien's private investigator, requesting an immediate toxicology analysis. The response came within hours. The tea contained a sophisticated compound, a slow-acting toxin that would mimic and exacerbate autoimmune symptoms. It was the same substance found in trace amounts in Nathaniel's system from months ago. So small the doctors had missed it. Someone in the house was still trying to kill him. Elena and Nathaniel sat in his room, the door locked, as Damien's security team swept the mansion for evidence. The investigation turned up something chilling. The toxin had been hidden inside a decorative sugar bowl in the sitting room, the one Elena used every night for their tea. It had been placed there recently, within the last few days. Whoever is doing this knows our routines, Elena said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to remain calm. They know I make tea for you every night at 10. They know I use that sugar bowl. Nathaniel reached for her hand, his grip weak but steady. I'm sorry, Elena. You shouldn't be in danger because of my father's desperate plan. Elena squeezed back, surprising herself with the protective surge she felt. We're in this together now, Nathaniel, and we're going to find out who's behind this. The investigation intensified. Security footage was reviewed. Staff members were questioned. Backgrounds were checked again. But whoever had planted the poison was clever, covering their tracks perfectly. Then, 1 week later, Elena received a message that made everything more complicated. It came via untraceable email, just 3 sentences that turned her world upside down. You think you can save him, but you're already too late. The poison was just the beginning. By the time you figure out the truth, Nathaniel Holloway will be dead. and you'll be next." Elena stared at the message, her hands shaking. The poison was just the beginning. What did that mean? Was there something else they were missing? Some other threat they hadn't considered? She showed Nathaniel the email. His face went grim as he read it. "Whoever sent this wants us to know they're still in control. They're playing with us, or warning us," Elena said slowly. "What if the poison isn't the real threat anymore? What if there's something else we should be looking for?" Nathaniel's eyes widened with realization. "The treatment. My doctors have been pushing me to undergo an experimental procedure, a bone marrow transplant that would supposedly help my immune system fight the autoimmune response." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. "And you've been refusing it because I didn't want to prolong the inevitable," Nathaniel admitted. "But what if that's exactly what they want? What if the treatment itself is the real danger?" They went to Damien immediately, sharing their suspicions. The investigators were already looking into the medical team, but now they focused specifically on the proposed treatment. What they found was terrifying. The recommended bone marrow donor had been carefully selected by Dr. Raymond, the live-in physician. But when investigators dug deeper, they discovered the donor's background was falsified. Like Victoria Cross, this person barely existed on paper. The bone marrow itself would have been contaminated, Damien's lead investigator explained, his face ashen. If Nathaniel had undergone the transplant, he would have died within weeks, and it would have looked like a complication from his existing condition. Dr. Raymond was arrested that night as he tried to flee the estate. Under questioning, he finally broke down and confessed. He had been recruited by an organization that specialized in targeting wealthy heirs, using slow-acting poisons and compromised medical treatments to ensure their deaths looked natural. Victoria Cross had been the first phase, establishing a relationship and administering the initial toxin. Dr. Raymond was the second phase, waiting for the perfect moment to finish the job with a fatal treatment. But why? Elena demanded when she heard the news. What was the point of all this? Money, Damien said bitterly. The organization was hired by competitors, business rivals who wanted to eliminate heirs and destabilize family companies. With the heirs dead and the families distracted by grief, hostile takeovers became easier. Nathaniel, sitting beside Elena and looking stronger than he had in months now that the poisoning had stopped, asked the question they were all thinking. Is it over? Is Victoria Cross still out there? The investigators don't know, Damien admitted. Dr. Raymond claims Victoria was just a persona, an identity used by the organization. The woman who played that role could be anyone now. So we'll always be looking over our shoulders, Nathaniel said quietly. Elena took his hand, feeling the connection between them that had grown beyond their strange arrangement. Then we looked together. You're getting better, Nathaniel. The poison is out of your system, and with proper treatment from doctors we can actually trust, you have a real chance. Nathaniel turned to her, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip. What we have now, it started as a transaction, a desperate plan by my father, but it's become something else, hasn't it? Elena nodded, unable to deny the truth. Somewhere between guarding you and fighting for you. I stopped seeing this as an assignment. You've become someone I genuinely care about, and you've become the reason I want to keep fighting, Nathaniel said softly. Not for my father's company or the family legacy, but because I want more time with you. Real time, not just borrowed days, while looking for threats in shadows. As they sat together in the mansion that had become both sanctuary and battlefield, Elena realized their story was far from over. The immediate threat might be neutralized, but Victoria Cross, whoever she really was, remained at large. Other heirs were still in danger, and the organization behind it all continued to operate in the shadows. But for now, at least, they had won a battle. Nathaniel was alive and healing. Elena had found a purpose beyond nursing, protecting someone she had come to love. And together, they would face whatever came next. The question that haunted them both was simple but terrifying. When would Victoria Cross strike again? And next time, would they see it coming? 3 months after Dr. Raymond's arrest, Nathaniel stood without assistance for the first time in a year. Elena watched from the doorway of the physical therapy room, her heart swelling with pride as he took 3 steady steps before gripping the parallel bars. The poison was finally purged from his system, and with legitimate medical care, his body was slowly rebuilding itself, but their victory felt hollow. Despite extensive investigations, Victoria Cross remained a ghost. The organization behind the attacks had gone dark, leaving no trail for investigators to follow. And every night, Elena checked locks twice, tested food obsessively, and woke at the slightest sound. "You're doing it again," Nathaniel said one evening, watching as Elena examined his dinner tray for the 3rd time. "The food is safe, Elena. We have a new chef, new staff, and security protocols that would make a military base jealous." Elena set down the fork she had been using to test his food. "I know, I just can't shake the feeling that we're missing something." Nathaniel wheeled closer, taking her hand. "We can't live like this forever, waiting for the other shoe to drop. At some point, we have to trust that we've secured our safety and actually start living." Before Elena could respond, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her accept the call. "Hello." The voice that came through was female, cultured, with a hint of amusement. "Hello, Elena, or should I say, Mrs. Holloway. How does it feel to be playing house with a dead man walking?" Eleanor's blood turned to ice. She switched the phone to speaker as Nathaniel's face drained of color. "Victoria." The laugh that came through was chilling. "Oh good, you remember me. Though I suppose Nathaniel would have told you all about our time together. Did he mention how trusting he was? How easy it was to make him believe I loved him?" "What do you want?" Elena demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "I want you to understand something," Victoria said, her voice turning cold. "Dr. Raymond was incompetent, sloppy, but his failure has given me an opportunity to reconsider my approach. You see, Elena, you've become far more interesting than I anticipated." "Interesting how?" Elena asked, trying to keep Victoria talking, while Nathaniel frantically texted Damien's security team. "You genuinely care about him," Victoria said, and there was something like curiosity in her tone. "That wasn't supposed to happen. You were meant to be another hired nurse, easily bought and easily disposed of, but you actually fell in love with the mark. That's deliciously ironic. If you're trying to intimidate us, it's not working," Elena said, though her trembling hands betrayed her. "Intimidate? No, Elena. I'm calling to make you an offer." Victoria's voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. "The organization I work for, we eliminate problems for very wealthy clients, but we also recognize talent when we see it. You've proven resourceful, protective, and most importantly, you can get close to people in ways our usual operatives can't." Elena felt sick. "You're recruiting me." "I'm offering you a choice," Victoria corrected. "Continue playing nurse to a dying heir and hope we don't finish what we started. Or join us, and I'll guarantee Nathaniel gets to live out whatever time his damaged organs allow him. We'll even forget the contract on his life." Nathaniel grabbed the phone. "This is insane. Elena would never work for you." Victoria's laugh was genuinely amused. "Wouldn't she? Tell me, Nathaniel, how much is your life worth to her?" 50 million. 100. Because I'm offering her the same thing your father did, money and purpose. The only difference is I'm honest about what the job entails." Elena took the phone back. "What makes you think I'd ever help you kill people?" "Because you've already proven you'd do anything to save someone you love," Victoria said softly. "That's a powerful motivator, Elena, and it's exactly what we look for in our recruits. Think about it. You have 48 hours to decide. If I don't hear from you, the contract on Nathaniel's life goes back into effect, and this time, there won't be clumsy doctors to blame. It will be swift, clean, and untraceable." The line went dead. Elena and Nathaniel sat in stunned silence for a moment before Damien burst into the room with his security team. They had traced the call to a burner phone in downtown Chicago, but by the time agents arrived, The phone had been discarded and Victoria was gone. "She's playing games," Damien said angrily, "trying to manipulate you both." "But what if she's serious?" Elena asked quietly. "What if refusing her offer means Nathaniel dies?" Nathaniel grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Elena, you can't seriously be considering this. She's a murderer, a professional killer. I'm considering keeping you alive." Elena shot back, her fear manifesting as anger. "That's all I'm considering." The next 48 hours were the longest of Eleanor's life. Security was tripled, but it felt like putting band-aids on bullet wounds. If Victoria Cross could orchestrate slow-acting poisonings and infiltrate medical teams, what couldn't she do? Elena barely slept, and when she did, nightmares plagued her. Dreams of Nathaniel dying, while she stood helpless, of Victoria's mocking laughter echoing through empty halls, of choices that had no right answers. On the morning of the second day, Elena made a decision. She called the number Victoria had used, knowing it would probably be disconnected, but hoping. It rang once before Victoria answered. "I was beginning to think you'd choose nobility over practicality," Victoria said. "What's your answer, Elena?" "I want to meet face to face," Elena said. "No more phone calls, no more games. If you want my answer, you meet me in person." There was a long pause. Then Victoria said, "Brave and foolish, fine. There's a cafe in Millennium Park, the Pavilion. Be there at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Come alone, or the deal is off." Elena agreed and hung up before Nathaniel could protest. She turned to find him and Damien, both staring at her with horror. "You can't meet with her," Nathaniel said desperately. "It's a trap." "Probably," Elena agreed, "but it's also our best chance to identify her, to get evidence the police can actually use. Damien's team can follow me, set up surveillance. We might finally be able to end this." Damien looked torn, but slowly nodded. "We'll have agents everywhere. But Elena, if things go wrong, if she threatens you in any way, you get out immediately." At 3 o'clock, Elena sat at an outdoor table at the Pavilion Cafe, trying to control her racing heart. Damien's agents were scattered throughout the park, disguised as tourists and joggers. A microscopic camera was pinned to Eleanor's jacket, recording everything. Victoria arrived exactly on time. She was striking, with auburn hair and green eyes, dressed in designer clothes that screamed money and taste. She smiled as she sat across from Eleanor, completely at ease despite knowing she was probably being watched. "You're even more beautiful in person," Victoria said conversationally. "I can see why Nathaniel fell for you, though I suppose he falls easily for women who pay him attention." Elena forced herself to remain calm. "You wanted my answer. Here it is. I will never work for you or your organization. Whatever threats you make, whatever you do, I won't help you kill people." Victoria's smile didn't waver. "That's disappointing but not unexpected. You're too ethical for this work." She leaned forward, and Elena smelled expensive perfume. "But here's what you need to understand, Elena. This isn't over. My employers don't like loose ends, and you've made yourself a very complicated loose end." Eleanor's pulse hammered. "So you're going to kill me?" "Eventually," Victoria said with chilling casualness. "But not today. Today, I'm going to give you a gift. Call it professional courtesy for at least considering my offer." "What gift?" "The truth," Victoria said. "The real reason Nathaniel was targeted. It wasn't about business rivals or hostile takeovers. That's just the service we provide. The specific contract on Nathaniel came from someone much closer to home." Elena felt the world tilt. "What do you mean?" Victoria pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed Nathaniel's uncle, Marcus Holloway, Damien's younger brother. He commissioned the hit 18 months ago. Wanted his nephew dead so he could inherit the company. He hired us, and we delivered. Elena stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. Marcus had been at the wedding, had visited Nathaniel during his illness, had seemed genuinely concerned. But if Victoria was telling the truth, he had been orchestrating his nephew's death the entire time. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena whispered. Victoria stood, straightening her jacket. "Because watching families destroy themselves is almost as satisfying as the money. And because when Marcus realizes you know, he'll either try to kill you himself or hire someone else to do it. Either way, you'll finally understand what it's like to have no safe place, no one to trust. She walked away calmly, disappearing into the crowd before Damien's agents could react. Elena sat frozen, the photograph clutched in her trembling hand. When she returned to the mansion, Elena went straight to Damien's office. Nathaniel was there too, and they both stood anxiously as she entered. "Tell me about your uncle, Marcus," Elena said without preamble. Damien's face darkened. "What did Victoria say?" Elena laid the photograph on the desk. She said Marcus hired the organization to kill Nathaniel, that this entire nightmare started because he wanted to inherit your empire. Nathaniel looked like he might be sick. "Uncle Marcus, that's impossible. He's family." But even as he said it, Elena could see doubt creeping into his eyes. How many times had Marcus visited? How often had he been in Nathaniel's rooms, with access to his food and medication? Damien was already on the phone with his investigators. Within hours, they had confirmation. Financial records showed Marcus had made substantial payments to shell companies connected to the organization. Emails were recovered showing communications with Dr. Raymond. The evidence was damning. Marcus Holloway was arrested that evening as he arrived for dinner at the mansion. He didn't deny it, simply smiled at his brother and nephew with chilling calm. "You were always too soft, Damien. The company needs strength, not sentiment." Nathaniel was weak, dying. "I was simply accelerating the inevitable." Nathaniel looked at his uncle with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. "You tried to murder me for money. For legacy," Marcus corrected. "For the future of everything our father built. You were never strong enough to lead." As police led Marcus away, Nathaniel collapsed into Eleanor's arms. She held him as he shook, the weight of betrayal finally breaking through his carefully maintained composure. "It's over," Eleanor whispered, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. Victoria Cross was still out there, the organization still operated, but the immediate threat, the person who had wanted Nathaniel dead most, was finally in custody. Over the following months, as Marcus faced trial and the organization's network was slowly dismantled, Nathaniel and Elena began to rebuild their lives, not as nurse and patient, not as bodyguard and protector, but as two people who had survived hell together and chosen to stay. 6 months after Marcus's conviction, Nathaniel stood at the altar without assistance, his color restored, his strength returning day by day. The experimental treatment that had nearly killed him was replaced with legitimate care that had pushed his condition into remission. Parts to coming soon.